Well, you agree that he was born of the Virgin Mother. Now, what was his purpose? I mean, this is another issue which obviously comes across all three religions. What would you say his purpose was, or what do we learn from the Bible, for example?
Well, from the Bible, also similar to the Holy Quran, where basically in both instances God tells us, well, in the Holy Quran God tells us in chapter 3, verse 50, that Jesus was sent as a messenger to the children of Israel, i.e. the Jews, basically. And in the Bible, this kind of message is also reiterated in the Gospel of Matthew, I believe, that while he was traveling, a Gentile woman approached her and begged him to heal her daughter. And he turned to her and said, "I've only been sent but to the 12 tribes of Israel." So, as Muslims, we basically interpret that, we see that as he was sent predominantly to the Jews and for the Jews. In the Gospel accounts, we don't see a single narrative of him actually preaching to Gentiles, nor did he actually go to any Gentile temples, but very often he'd go into synagogues and preach over there. So we kind of limit his message to that, basically.
So what we're saying, that the message of Christianity, as we understand it, wasn't a global message. It was specifically for the people of Jewish origin?
Yes, that would be the end of the interpretation, that Jesus was sent not as a global messenger, but rather a message to the Israelites or to the Jews, and his mission kind of focused around there. It was only at a later time that it began to get a bit more global, and when Gentiles or non-Jews began being accepted in quite vast numbers, that the kind of Jewish Christian side began to decrease, and eventually the Gentile church did take over.
Thank you very much for that, Mashood. If you would like to take part in tonight's discussion, which is on the person of Jesus Christ, on whom be peace, and the Islamic point of view, you can call our studio on 0208 180 2523. That's 0208 180 2523. You can also text our studio. The number is 07961 573 883. The number for you once again is 07961 573 883. Do send in your questions or give us a call, and we will bring you on air. The time now is 7:50.
Can I stop?
Yeah, stop now.
Which one?
You're listening to 94.3 FM Voice of Africa Radio. This is our Sunday Islam Hour, brought to you by the Ahmadiyya Muslim Association. The topic of tonight's programme is an interesting one, and it is on the personage of Jesus Christ, on whom be peace, and it is a topic which we're presenting from the Islamic point of view, or from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community's point of view. If you'd like to take part in tonight's discussion, you can phone our studio. The number for you is, as always, 0208 180 2523. That's 0208 180 2523. You can also text our studio. The text lines are open. It's 07961 573 883. That's 07961 573 883. Now, with me in the studio, I have Mashood Ahmad, who is studying biblical studies at master's level, who'll be answering your questions tonight. Now, Mashood, we've mentioned a little bit about the pretext. We've mentioned, about the birth of Jesus Christ, on whom be peace. Let's talk about the crucifixion, which is a humongous topic which we could probably talk about for days. But let's present the viewpoint. And that viewpoint of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Association, and what their beliefs are around the crucifixion. Now, I mean, I suppose the straightforward question is did he die on the cross?
No. According to our point of view, no, he did not die on the cross. This is known as the Swoon theory. Basically, the way we say it is that if you look at all the Gospels, if you combine them and kind of create a narrative, you begin to see quite strong hints in the Bible itself, which actually suggest that he actually survived the cross. Quite a few points. I mean, we're talking about in the beginning part, he actually goes to praise in the Garden of Gethsemane. Now he prays there in quite a lot of depth, a lot of anguish, and he's praying to God to take this cup away from me. Do not let me die on the cross. Now, the way we interpret this, that he was not actually fearful of his own life, but rather he was fearful that his disciples and his mission would be in peril. Because if he were to die on the cross, he would be dying as a criminal, and obviously the Messiah could not die as a criminal. And this was actually the Jewish plan, well, the way we interpreted this.
On that, why was it so important for the Jews to crucify him? What did that prove?
It basically proved that he was the false Messiah. He was crucified just outside Jerusalem on a certain crossroads, where all the pilgrims were actually there from all around the neighboring Jewish kind of tribes in a way. They all had come for the Passover, their yearly Passover. So obviously Jesus also came to Jerusalem to preach his message, so that the intention was that these Jews would then receive his message and go back into their homelands and preach that, look, the Messiah has come. Now obviously, according to our point of view, the Jewish priests, the Sanhedrin at that time, were a bit fearful of this. So their idea was to actually crucify him publicly so that he would die on the cross. So all of the pilgrims would see that, would witness it, return back to the homelands and say, no, certain personage, Jesus Christ, he cannot be the Messiah because he died on the cross. And obviously the Messiah figure in Judaism would not go through that such an ordeal.
Now, we mentioned, and this is obviously quite an interesting point to discuss, and you mentioned Mark verse 14, chapter 36, where I think I said that right. Mark 14:36, where he says to remove the cup of death upon the cross, where Jesus has prayed for this. Now, if Jesus, as I understand it, is God, then why would he pray to God? I'm sort of confused there.
This is where, well, obviously you'd have to refer to the Christians to actually give their interpretation of what they think of it is. But I mean, I've heard quite a few different points of view that it was the human side of Jesus which was actually praying, while the God side was actually readily accepting his destiny to die onto the cross. Obviously, our interpretation is quite straightforward. He did not want to die on the cross. He wanted to survive, obviously, and carry on his mission, which was to preach to the 12 tribes of Israel. Which brings us back to the original point that if he actually did die on the cross and then resurrect and ascend into heaven, then was his mission actually fulfilled? Because we know that at the time where he lived in Judea, there were only 2 tribes of Israel living around that area, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. The rest of the 10 tribes was quite scattered. Excuse me. Basically 700 years earlier, the Assyrian king had come and invaded a lot of Israel and had scattered the tribes of Israel, the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And these were scattered all across the east. So our interpretation again is that his mission was to preach to all of the Jews, so that it not only involved the 2 local tribes, but also all the rest of the remaining 10 tribes.
Thank you for that, Mashood. I'm going to invite our listeners once again, if you are listening to tonight's programme and you do have a viewpoint or a question to ask of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community on the person of Jesus Christ and our beliefs, you can always call our studio. It's 0208 180 2523. It's 0208 180 2523. If you'd like to text in your questions, the number for you is 07961 573 883. That's 07961 573 883. I should also mention the point of our topic tonight is merely a discussion and to present the views of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Association, and by no means do we wish to hurt the sentiments or the beliefs of any of our listeners this evening, but by all means call our studio and we will take your questions live on air. Now, Mashood, you've mentioned the crucifixion. I just want to stay around this topic for a bit. Now, how can we sort of gather from the Bible that Jesus didn't die on the cross? Now we know from the Bible that he showed himself to his disciples afterwards, or 3 days later. How do we know that he didn't die within that period and didn't resurrect?
Well, we have quite a few hints in the Bible. Of course, the Bible doesn't clearly state, look, he survived the cross. But in fact, if you look at the whole narrative, you can pick up on a lot of hints. The first kind of clear one would be the actual duration of the cross, him staying onto the cross. While the main purpose of crucifixion was a kind of a prolonged torture. People would normally last for 3 days, up to even 6 days onto the cross. They would die of starvation, of thirst, or being attacked by animals or so. Now Jesus, according to, I think Matthew it is, was only on the cross for about 3 hours. Luke tends to extend it to 6 hours. So he was only there for a very limited amount of time. It brings us further. Basically, if you look at the narratives, it tells us that just before Jesus, he was basically crucified along with 2 other thieves. So when the Passover was actually coming upon